Why every real man drove this car in the 80s. It's 1985. Reagan's in the White House. MTV is playing actual music. And somewhere in a high school parking lot, an IROC-Z just pulled in, idling like a lion with a hangover. Heads turn, conversations stop, and every kid with a denim jacket and feathered hair knows exactly what just showed up. This is not just a Camaro. This is the Camaro. This is the IROC-Z. And in the 1980s, if you were a real man, or at least trying to look like one, this was the car that got you there. But why? What made the IROC-Z the icon it became? Why did so many American men lust after it, live through it, and still talk about it like it was the one that got away? To answer that, we need to go back, way back. The Camaro first hit the streets in 1967. It was Chevy's answer to Ford's Mustang, and it came out swinging. Muscle car culture exploded in the late 60s and early 70s, but by the time the oil crisis and emissions regulations strangled the industry in the mid 70s, things started to feel neutered. Enter the third generation Camaro. Chevy knew it had to do something different. The old school, heavy hitting muscle car vibe wasn't cutting it anymore. Gas prices were up, insurance rates were brutal, and performance? Let's just say the late 70s models were about as exciting as watching paint dry. So in 1982, Chevrolet dropped the third gen Camaro, and it was like a shot of adrenaline straight to the chest of American car culture. It was lighter, it was sharper, it looked like it came from the future. And by 1985, Chevy introduced the ultimate trim level, the IROC-Z, named after the International Race of Champions, a series where identical cars were raced by professional drivers to determine the best of the best. The IROC-Z was built to look and act like it belonged on a track. And it wasn't just marketing fluff. The IROC-Z came with a tuned suspension, bigger sway bars, upgraded shocks, and an attitude problem. This was a Camaro that didn't just go fast in a straight line, it could actually handle a corner. Under the hood, you had options. The 5.0-liter, 305 cubic inch V8 was the bread and butter, but it wasn't just a lazy cruiser. It came with tuned port injection, a techie little miracle borrowed from the Corvette, which bumped up the torque and made throttle response instant. By 1987, you could even get a 5.7-liter, 350 cubic inch V8 making 225 horsepower. That might not sound earth-shattering today, but in 1980s horsepower-starved America, that was serious firepower. And the styling? Oh man, the styling. Long, low, and angular. Sharp nose, integrated ground defense, bold decals that shouted IROC-Z like a declaration of war. It was the kind of car you didn't just drive. You arrived in it. You made an entrance. And if you parked it at a party, you'd better believe someone was going to ask you for a ride. But the IROC-Z wasn't just about numbers. It was about vibe. This car was aspirational. If you were a blue-collar kid with a summer job and a dream, the IROC was the light at the end of the tunnel. It meant you'd made it, or at least you looked like you had. It was the car your older brother drove when he picked you up from school blasting Def Leppard. It was the car your dad warned you about. The car you saw in every high school parking lot with T-tops open and a cassette deck chewing through Van Halen. And it had character. That V8 rumble that shook the mirrors, the way the rear end would wiggle under throttle, the interior that smelled like a mix of vinyl and teenage dreams. It wasn't perfect, not even close. The build quality? Questionable. The dashboard squeaked. The T-tops leaked. The back seat was basically a padded shelf. But none of that mattered, because the IROC-Z had soul. It had presence, swagger, that intangible something that made it unforgettable. And today, decades later, it still has that power. You see one on the road and it takes you back to a time before everything went digital, before every car looked like a jelly bean, when men wore mustaches without irony, and your ride said more about you than your Instagram ever could. The IROC-Z represents a chapter in American car history where performance was being rediscovered, where the future was uncertain, but the road was wide open. And sure, modern Camaros are faster, more refined, safer, but they're not this. They're not raw or loud or imperfect in the way that makes something feel real. The IROC-Z wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of ambition, of attitude, of an era that was unapologetically itself. And that's why every real man in the 80s drove one, or wished he did, because deep down, we all want something that roars when we hit the gas, something that turns heads, something that feels like it's alive. That's the IROC-Z, and that's why it'll never die. Sayonara, this is Matthew of Autosium signing off. See you in the next one.